Okay, I want to welcome everyone here today. Lots of people are working on Yemeni time, but we started on time at the American Enterprise Institute. I'm thrilled to have with us His Excellency Khalid al-Yemeni, the former Foreign Minister of Yemen, as well as Fernando Caraval, who is the head of the American Center for South Yemeni Studies and was on the United Nations panel of experts for Yemen until he let facts get in the way of politics. But with that, as you know, when I do events, which is rarely, we don't do speeches. We're just going to start with the conversation. Summer Ahmed will be here soon. And feel free to boo when she comes for being late. At any rate, I'd like to just get started with an open question about, frankly, is this the end of South Yemen? Take it away.
Okay, never the end, because this is the hope of Southerners for quite a long time. Now, in the last 3 decades, we were fighting to get our right to delink ourselves from the failed United Yemen. Let me just tell you, the history of Yemen is showing permanent characteristics that will be very interesting for researchers to look into. It's always the struggle between those veiling for sovereignty, and they are very small, weak group, and those that working as proxies of foreign countries in the region. And this is the history of Yemen. It's not something that I'm telling you 10, 15 years. And
I'm sorry, let me interrupt. Are there any authentic South Yemenis that aren't proxies of a foreign country?
Actually, wherever in the history, I'm not telling you what's happening. It was the tendency of Yemenis to, and it comes also from the legend Saif bin Yazan, a Hamirate king in the first century, second century, and he
the Jewish kingdom.
Yeah, the Jewish kingdom, and he was fighting the Christians, the Ethiopians who came to Yemen, and he went to Persia seeking help. So they came back to Yemen and helped him, and this is a tendency that we call it the Yazani conflict or the Yazani dilemma, because Yemenis, they fight each other and everyone is looking for backup. This is the fact of history. And the Houthis are the real manifestation of that phenomena. They started being groomed by the Iranians from the beginning, and they have nothing to do with the Shia as Shia, but they are Zaydis. And then they started to transform into the Twelvers.
Okay, but I want to bring it back to the here and now, because we're all academics, but it's all well and good to say that, there's going to be future people in the South who are going to attach, but if Saudi Arabia is the predominant power, and if Saudi Arabia has crushed the Southern movement, if it's completely folded, when is there hope? And Fernando?
I don't think that the Southern movement is crushed. The Saudi overreaction, miscalculation since December 10th, December 11th of 2025, marginalized temporarily the Southern Transitional Council, which was the first attempt by Southerners to organize the movement officially. If you recall, Hirak al-Salmi, this was the organic movement that's began around 2006. So for me, when we ask the question, is there a future for South Yemen, we have to differentiate between Southern Yemen and South Yemen, right? The 8 provinces are South Yemen, the old socialist entity. There is a future for South Yemen itself. It's just as I wrote in our last article at the forum in December, it is a bit beyond the near horizon at the moment. No matter whether the SDC forces have become victorious in December or what's going on today, there is a future for South Yemen because the South Yemen movement is organic. And we saw that in Hadramaut and Sayun, in Mukalla, where the people came out immediately after the clashes began on December 3rd. In Hadramaut, the masses, the public came out and organically started calling for the emergence of the South state, the southern state. So I think that what we're going to see in the short term, next 3 months, 6 months, it's going to be a continuous popular uprising manifested in demonstrations. Let's keep in mind the Southerners have never chosen violence to oppose Sana'a or the coalition or the legitimate government. In the sense of
jump in, otherwise Fernando will talk forever.
I think it's very important what Fernando is saying. During the last 3 decades, Southerners decided to wage a peaceful war to regain their statehood. They never launched to fight. They were very constructive in fighting terrorism. They were very constructive to cooperate with the international community in safeguarding the maritime routes in the Southern Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. And they were very active with the international community. But the international community failed them all the time because they never look into the issue as this is the right of people, a peaceful people expressing itself. But it's dangerous if you keep, when I was asked last time, what do you think about this movement that we have, the climax of this movement? Is it going to go to declare independence or pushing for independence? I said, look, there is a small window of opportunity. If we manage to do it, we can go through. But unfortunately, that one was spoiled.
Before we turn to summer, I'm going to pick on Fernando simply because you're the non-Yemeni among us, and myself, but moderators shouldn't speak. The question I have is, if what His Excellency the Foreign Minister is saying, doesn't Saudi Arabia, why doesn't Saudi Arabia recognize that? If it's going to be impossible to crush that southern aspiration for a separate state, if the South isn't going to subordinate itself to Sana'a, then why doesn't Riyadh, or more broadly, the other international governments with which you dealt as a member of the UN panel of experts, why don't they see it?
Definitely, it's history, as Khalid mentioned earlier. It's history, it's miscalculation. We've seen miscalculation after miscalculation since January 2015. This is when King Abdullah dies. And so the last 10 years, now 11 years, we've seen a number of missteps in the peninsula. And what we just saw this weekend, I don't know if you were paying attention to the dialogue ceremony in Riyadh. On the one hand, the Southerners are praising Saudi Arabia for recognizing the Southern issue and even placing the Southern flag, the PDRY flag in Riyadh, which was technically the first time, etc. And then on the other side, the Northerners pro-unity are condemning Saudi Arabia for empowering this flag and this movement. Saudi Arabia is in between these two extremes. And unfortunately, as I wrote again for MEF, Saudi Arabia, in my opinion, missed a huge opportunity in December because the Southerners, the SDC, are a much bigger, stronger, more cohesive partner for Saudi national interest than was the weak, legitimate government based in Sana'a. The SDC is committed to security in Hadramaut and Mahra and across the south, which means going against smugglers for the Houthis, weapons from Iran into the Houthis, which means going after AQAP, which means deterring instability among the population. And so Saudi Arabia, since 1994, since July, my last point, since July 1994, Saudi Arabia has been committed to a united Yemen in policy. This 1994 was the civil war between the North and the South. And Ali Abdullah Saleh was able to coerce Saudi Arabia with one promise: I'll sign the border treaty with you, which was signed in 2000.
Yeah.
Right? And if we look at the Saudi statement from December 17, right before the airstrikes, the Saudis let out a statement saying, for our national security interest, we must go into Hadramaut. The border with Hadramaut was never threatened.
Okay. What I want to ask, as Summer, welcome, as Summer is the Foreign Affairs Representative of the Southern Transitional Council in Washington, but also at the United Nations in New York. What I want to ask you is, look, a month ago, things looked to be going pretty well. You were consolidating control over the Hadramaut and Mahra, and then everything came crashing down. Was this a failure of STC diplomacy and intelligence? Was this a deliberate trap on the part of Saudi Arabia? Forensically, what happened? And if I can be blunt, how did the Southern Transitional Council walk into a situation which has had such serious ramifications?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thanks to the American Enterprise Institute for having this space to discuss the southern issue and the changes in South Yemen. You could say it was a combination of both, and the timing was not, it worked against us, especially with the current rift between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So the timing was against us. And then also diplomacy. There was some failure in diplomacy. This is me personally. We in the STC could have done more to communicate with the Saudis, to have things go smoothly. And however, just things went downhill, and it was beyond our control because of the rift.
And then, I mean, generally speaking, and I open this up to all of you, and you can talk amongst yourselves too, but what's the United Arab Emirates thinking in this? Why? I mean, it's one thing to pull back out of the Hadramaut, but Socotra? I mean, is that no longer a strategic element? Yeah.
So, sorry to jump in really quick, but this has been one of those misunderstood issues during the conflict. The Emiratis left Socotra a while ago.
But didn't they control the airport?
No, the Saudis have been controlling the airport.
Okay.
And even a lot of journalists that have visited, Western journalists that have visited Socotra recently, pointed out that they could only see Saudi military planes in the airport. The misconception here is that throughout Socotra, throughout the islands, you see locals waving the Emirati flag because the Emirates have definitely delivered millions of dollars in humanitarian assistance and development since 2017, I believe, for schools, etc. Socotra, in the eyes of the STC or the Southerners, was a top priority because it's on the smuggling routes, on the sea routes. And to them, seeing the Muslim Brotherhood, al-Islah, as a primary threat to the South, they believe that the connection, the relations between the Muslim Brotherhood and the Houthis would utilize Socotra as a transit route for the smugglers into Shabab or back into North Yemen.
Okay, but just generally speaking, yeah, go.
It's really a pity to see two big partners in the Middle East starting to fighting each other. It's still in the diplomatic level, but it might go astray. We don't know what will happen next.
You're talking Saudi Arabia
the Saudis
and the Emirates.
And the Emiratis, yeah.
Okay.
We always looked at both of them as our partner in the war against Houthis. If you remember, Michael, from 2015, when we started Operations Decisive Storm, I think there were sort of agreement, non-written agreement about the labor division, that the Emiratis were working in the southern part of Yemen, is the vast area of land,
yeah,
and very difficult, and the Saudis will take care of the north. Of course, they were supporting each other but the real presence was there. The Emirati did the job, but the corruption, the level of corruption in the north was impeding the Saudis to really achieve anything in the north. But to lose all the lands they managed to take in the beginning of the war. Now we have only 3 districts in Taiz and only the city of Marib and the surrounding of Marib. The rest is being occupied by the Houthis. So whose mistake is this? Is it the Southern movement mistake? Is it the people who fought every time they have an issue? Is it the giant brigade who already reached to Hodeidah seaport and they were almost finishing the job before the intervention of the international community to stop us?
Let me flip it. I mean, what you're saying, flip it, and I'll bring it to Summer. If you're saying that the reason why the Saudis had stumbled in the north was simply because of all the corruption in the north, but the Emiratis were successful in the south because the south was significantly less corrupt, does that mean, and I'm asking you, Summer, if the Saudis are now in power in the south but aren't facing that systematic corruption, they could be as successful in the south as the Emiratis were?
Right. We in the South, we worked with both of them, and like His Excellency said, they had split duties where Saudi Arabia focused on the north and the UAE focused on the south. And the UAE, throughout the past 10 years, they built really close relationships with the Southerners, with the Southern communities and the people, and also the leadership. They had more success because they were able to interact better with Southerners, and then at the same time, Southerners were one unit. Despite our differences when it comes to fighting the Houthis, we're united because we've always viewed the Houthis as an existential threat to Southerners. So all Southerners, despite their political differences, united to fight the Houthis, where it wasn't the same in the north. In the north, some of the political entities over there, specifically the Islah Party, the branch of the Muslim Brotherhood in the north, they focused mainly on fighting the south. And even though the southern forces were the ones fighting the Houthis and liberating even northern areas from Houthi control, like the west coast, Makha, all the way to Hodeidah, and then the northern parts of Al-Dala. Their focus, the Islah Party's focus, was mostly on how to control the south and fight the southern forces. The biggest losses, they had a lot of territory prior to 2019, but their biggest losses came in 2019 when they decided to mobilize their forces and go and occupy Shabwa and Abyan, leaving that open to the Houthis to take control of Al-Jawf and Marib. So it was that diversion.
I just have a two-finger before you jump in. Wait, Khalid, just a second. You had mentioned Mocha. Who's in control of Mocha right now? This is just a factual question.
Currently, it's Tariq Saleh, the National Resistance Forces, and the Southern Giants Brigade. That hasn't changed.
Okay.
No.
It's really, we need to understand that demoralizing the morale of our brigades in the south would not help the Saudis. This is very important. And I'm telling everyone, this is really structures that were built to fight. And they are very serious. In every battle, they were succeeding all the time. In the north, helping Marib when Marib was under attack, helping Al-Bayda all the time, keeping the areas after Al-Dala, the border with the north under control, helping Tariq Saleh in the west coast, all southern brigades. But what's happening now, moving them, just trying to show that a lot of humiliation, I think, that's not good. That's not good. This would not build a momentum for Yemen to recover Sana'a from the Houthis. Do you think, after what happened, the southern brigades will be willing to go to Sana'a? They don't have hope in their future. They don't know if there will be really a roadmap towards independence.
Okay, Fernando, you.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point going back to your issue of the Saudis and why the Emiratis left. The morale now among the Southern transitional forces or the Southern forces will diminish. I mean, they had been empowered. Let's remember to Khalid's point, the Giants brigades and the Shebwa elite are the ones that expelled the Houthis from Shebwa and made them run back into Al-Baida after the Riyadh agreement. Again, chased them into southern Marib and made them retreat towards Sirwa. So no legitimate government military units had achieved any victory against the Houthis. Let me give you one last example. What we're seeing today is a reversal of the October 2019 conflict, where in October 2019, the Southern forces were making gains against Islah forces, Presidential Guard forces in Aden and Abiyan. Saudis did not intervene militarily back then, if you recall. The Saudis didn't intervene militarily, and they allowed the conflict to play out. Today, what we saw is the Emiratis doing the same thing and saying, wait, we cannot directly go into an armed conflict with Saudi Arabia. And if we support overtly, militarily, overtly the Southern, that will feed the narrative of the proxy war and a direct war between the Emiratis, which if we recall the conflict with Qatar, right? The Emiratis were not willing to risk an escalation of GCC conflict beyond what happened with Qatar.
I want to put you on the spot because for diplomacy's sake, I don't want to force Khalid or Summer to answer this question. If we've seen Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula already start to target for assassination generals of the Southern Giants.
Today.
Is that today? Is that a deliberate policy choice on behalf of Saudi Arabia where they want to is Saudi Arabia working hand in hand with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula to eliminate the most capable generals of the South?
I think it is showing the weaknesses of the vacuum and the immense
but
vacuum
you don't think
created.
It's deliberate?
I don't believe that it would be
Khalid wants to
deliberate.
Really,
I don't believe it's
let
deliberate.
me just, Fernando, tell you something. This is the work of the Muslim Brotherhood. Everyone understand during the history of our struggle against AQAP, we will see, for example, in recent weeks, all these CENTCOM operations in Marib and different areas is attacking leaders, operative of Al-Qaeda, where? In Marib, and Marib is the hinterland of the Muslim Brotherhood. So everyone in the international community, in the intelligence community, they understand that this is the headquarters of the Muslim Brotherhood in Yemen. So who will start operations of AQP? Because I always told people.
So are you saying that are you differentiating between Muslim Brotherhood and AQAP?
I can't differentiate because they are part of the operational cooperation. They have cooperation with the Houthis. And it's really interesting when you see the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islah Party, they have relations. They have connections in Sana'a. They have connections in Turkey. They have connections here and there. And they are part of the legitimacy in Riyadh.
So actually, let me ask you this question.
And the Saudis understand this issue.
What I want to do is ask all of you a one-word answer, and then you can go back and explain. Back in November, President Trump issued an executive action calling on Secretary of State Marco Rubio to designate Muslim Brotherhood affiliates. And he started with, I guess, the Muslim Brotherhood affiliate in Lebanon. Should ISLA be designated, in your opinion, by the United States to be a terrorist group, a foreign terrorist organization?
As part of the Muslim Brotherhood, yes.
Yes. What about you, Khalid?
Look.
Yeah, one word.
It's only one word. Yes, it should be.
And then we can explain. Summer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so now explain.
I keep in mind, I remind the audience, the U.S. has already sanctioned a number of Islam members as either connected as terrorists, connected to terrorist funding, funding terrorism, etc. A major one currently, Hamid al-Ahmar, for example, but even Zindani, Abdelmajid Zindani, the long AQ affiliate, was sanctioned by the US. So the next step for the US, if it wants to insert itself into Yemen, really, it needs to do this. Otherwise, we've argued this plenty of times. I've argued with people inside the State Department. The US since 1967 delegated Yemen to Saudi Arabia. This is Saudi's backyard. This is Saudi's priority. They have been the primary funder of Yemen's deficit since 1967. They created a committee to handle the Yemen files since 1967. Oil industry, et cetera, et cetera. Friends of Yemen, the G10 in 2011, now the Quad, et cetera. This is under the hands of Saudi Arabia. The Emirates, back to my argument comparing to 2019, the Emirates has basically said, you took over the Yemen file on November 2019 with the Riyadh agreement, you handle it. Everything, you handle it. And then we'll see what happens, right? And it's not a very smart move from the Emirates because I think they should have a more straightforward policy and partnership. But this is basically what the Gulf tribalism, basically as we describe it, the friendships, the relationship in the Gulf, is about avoiding conflict.
Okay. Khalid and then Summer.
This issue of the Muslim Brotherhood is very serious because you can't sleep with Satan and expect that they will bear a very healthy baby. This is really a manifestation of the destruction all over the place. They are responsible for what happened in Algeria. I remember the history. They are responsible for what happened in Egypt. They are in every place they go. They just launch wars and destruction. And why only Islah Party is legitimate? Because it's really in Yemen, and we understand that who is creating all these terrorist groups, multiple names, not only AQAP. We have Daesh, but we don't. Daesh and Al Qaeda in Yemen is a national product. They were used by Ali Abdullah Saleh. They were used by others in the struggle. And Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, the president of the Republic of Yemen, he told us in a small group, he said, look, because I was from Abiyan, President Saleh asked me to do him a favor. And I said, no, I can't do that. It's very dangerous for me as a person from the South. He said, if you don't do this, you will see what will happen in Abiyan. Al-Qaeda will take Abiyan. It was only 2 weeks before Abiyan was taken by Al-Qaeda. Is that really something by accident? It was really from the national security of Saleh's operatives that they started this process.
I want to get Summer's take on this.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood, or their branch in Yemen, the Islah Party, they have a long track record of supporting and funding Al-Qaeda, and now they're supporting the Houthis. So, and they've been a destabilizing factor in Yemen, in delaying the liberation in the north, in playing the double game of being in the legitimate government while at the same time having their areas as launch pads and hotspots and refuge for Al-Qaeda, like in Marib. So it is very important that the State Department looks at the Islah Party and their actions in Yemen, whether it's their destabilizing actions or their support for Al-Qaeda and the Houthis to be...
Just one point before going. Let me just emphasize that for the Saudis, it's a national security issue. That's the fact of life. That for them, Yemen is a security issue, is a national security issue for the Saudis. Of course, how they handle it, this is a different story. But maybe it's not as critical as such for the Emiratis. That's why I think the Emiratis, when they decide, feeling that the big brother is really pissed off, they decided to pull out.
But if I may, Michael, really quick, for the Emiratis, though, creating space for the Muslim Brotherhood after the action by the U.S. is a national security threat for the Emiratis themselves, because just as we see in Syria with Ashara taking over Damascus, for the Muslim Brotherhood, for Islam to come back since 2019 to power, in the front of power. Since 2019, Islam has been relegated behind the scenes, right? Especially since the creation of the Presidential Leadership Council, where Dr. Abdallah Al-Alimi, who was Hadi's secretary, was placed in the PLC instead of a high-ranking Islahi. That was a huge message, right? But since April 2022, Islam has been operating behind the scenes. With this action by Saudi, now they are going to put Islam back in the front. This is a threat to
I want to
UAE.
be blunt and cause some trouble for a second, Mr. Foreign Minister.
Only one word. It's really critical to understand that the Muslim Brotherhood it's reinventing itself every time.
Okay.
You see manifestation of it in here and there, and every time you think that the Arab Spring failed in Egypt, but you see them coming up, popping up
Okay.
somewhere else. And this is dangerous. If you don't know how to deal with the Islah Party, with the Muslim Brotherhood, and all their branches that are infecting our societies, then you have an issue as Americans, and we have issue in the national level.
Summer wants to filibuster me from asking my question. Go ahead.
Well, what many people in the South are always wondering and confused about is the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood are banned in Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
and they are recognized as a terrorist group in Saudi Arabia. Yet Saudi Arabia supports the Islah Party and the Muslim Brotherhood in Yemen, and a lot of people in the South see that as counterproductive. How are you banning them in your country, but then supporting them against us here?
Is this like, Hafiz al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad in Hama, where they crush them at home, but then are willing to appease them, co-opt them, as long as they conduct their jihad for export only?
I don't think that's the intention of the
Okay.
Saudis. Even for example, everything that's happening in the South right now, when the UAE pulled out, about the southern forces, morale was low, and it still is. And then right now with the increased attacks of AQAP attacks, and then also the Houthis launched several drone attacks on the southern Giants brigades that are at the Shabwa Marib front, and then also on Lahj
front,
and Al-Dala areas. I don't believe that is intended by the Saudis to cause that chaos, but I know that the Houthis and AQAP are exploiting that vacuum and that low morale.
This is what Samar is saying, dangerous, because we will see a bloody confrontation between terrorism supported by the Muslim Brotherhood in the South. They now will take everyone who was fighting the Western struggle against terrorism in the South. They will go after every and each one. And it will be bloody. And I'm really hope that the Saudis understand what they are doing in South Yemen.
Let me ask a blunt question. If all of you have said that that Islah in Yemen should be considered a terrorist group, and if Saudi Arabia is sponsoring and encouraging Islah in South Yemen, does it follow that the United States, by any objective standard, should designate Saudi Arabia as a state sponsor of terror?
Not under this administration, because there's always
I'm not saying what they should do, but I mean what they will do, but should they? And you guys don't have to answer if it's too embarrassing.
The way I've explained this relationship between Saudi and Islah since 1967, because since this relationship goes back to the end of the revolution in North Yemen, is keep your enemies closer right? And Islam and Saudi Arabia has managed Islam since its inception, official establishment in the 1980s. And Saudi Arabia funded the sheikhs within Islam, knowing precisely who belonged to the Muslim Brotherhood based in Egypt, which was, the relationship was created in 1947. That's how far back the Muslim Brotherhood has been in North Yemen. And so Saudi Arabia at the moment is walking a fine line with the US administration because of this Muslim Brotherhood issue.
Let me ask you another, I'll leave, you want to
yeah.
answer? Okay.
No, I'm not answering your question, but I'm telling you, I come again and again to the issue is the national security for the Saudis.
Okay.
But the problem with the Saudis, maybe they don't know which better instrument to use to protect its national security. So they are running to a terrorist organization, thinking that this terrorist organization will help control the South. If they failed in the North, they will fail in the South. With the same instruments, they need to change the modus operandi to work and get a solution where the Southerners are happy with the Saudis. And that's why we come back to the dialogue now in Riyadh about the Southern dialogue in Riyadh.
I've got a question about that coming up,
please.
But I want to put Fernando on the spot one more time. During the Biden administration, both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance very much criticized Biden for his ineffectiveness when Azerbaijan, a dictatorship, overran Artsakh and ethnically cleansed it, which had long aspired to autonomy, if not independence. And both of them, and it was a case of an undemocratic army running roughshod over a proto-democratic entity. Is what happened in South Yemen analogous? I mean, are Biden and Vance being hypocritical for criticizing Biden for not taking action on Artsakh? Is this analogous or no?
Definitely it is, because there was a huge opportunity missed with the relationship with the Southern forces. And this is definitely, again, a reversal of progress since 2019. There was hope on the ground. I mean, not to be a SDC cheerleader over and over, but what the SDC accomplished between January 2020 and November 2025 was huge progress in southern Yemen when we look at history, as Khalid has mentioned. And in Yemen, everything takes time. Everything takes time. You cannot, from one day to the other, say, today we're going to declare. This was the shortcoming for the SDC, and the reality check for my southern friends, every time they're like, oh, Aidarus needs to declare the southern state. And I said, you don't know what you're asking for. This takes time.
Aidarus Subedi being the head of the
SDC.
And formerly the vice president of Yemen.
We never really push for the idea of independence tomorrow.
Okay.
Never. It was just the propaganda
to have
of
a
the Muslim
plebiscite.
Brotherhood. To say, oh, look, they are declaring without coordination with the Saudis. We wanted only a self-administration, which is now the Hadramis are calling for.
Okay.
But we said we will take it step by step.
Okay.
In agreement with the Saudis. But unfortunately, everything was missed out. Let me just jump into
one quick question. Really quick. To your point, putting me on the spot, it's not just to say that Vance and this administration have missed an opportunity, but yes, the Biden administration missed a huge opportunity in the last year of its term in not reaching out to the SDC and strengthening and really getting to know what was going on in South Yemen. So yes, right now, today, this administration is hands off and it's lost in Yemen.
Should the U.S. embassy to Yemen be in Saudi Arabia?
No.
Okay. Anyone disagree?
The question for the... I'm really still waiting to be an American citizen.
Yeah.
But let me tell you something about the America is about values, not money. America is not about money. America is creating money, but it's about values, human rights, and all those beautiful things that we run from our countries to settle in this great nation. And I hope that this administration understand really was the meaning of value over money.
Okay. I want to put everyone out. I mean, I've put you on the spot. I want to put you two on the spot, but I'm not going to designate this question to either one of you specifically. I'll give you some wiggle room. Is the Southern Transitional Council delegation in Riyadh right now, are they a political delegation or are they hostages?
STC representative.
Next question. Sorry.
I speak with them.
Yes.
We talk. I personally do not believe they are hostages. There are people on the ground who do believe that they are. I personally do not, because I do speak with them,
Okay.
and they speak highly of the Saudis and the efforts that Saudi Arabia has taken to sponsor the Southern Dialogue, and also internationalize the Southern cause and the Southern Dialogue. I did ask a couple of them that have contacted me if they were hostages. They said no, so I'll take their word for it. And I'm not going to be a devil's advocate. I know the Saudi Arabia really cares about stability in Yemen, because stability in Yemen, kind of goes back to stability in Saudi Arabia. So they do care about security in Yemen, and also they care about protecting the liberated areas, which is South Yemen. The intention is good. The methods or the tactics are not right, but I will give them credit that they have taken strides. Their representative, the envoy currently in Aden, Al-Shahrani, has been meeting with the locals and trying to connect with Southerners and the local authorities.
The issue
so
of,
they are taking strides to make things
Riyadh
better.
conference on the south is really a huge success for the Southern cause. It's very important to understand. For the first time, I don't want to go into history, but the Southern cause was in a small progress all the time. So it was first 19, then 22, the establishment in 17, then 19, then 22, then 25, unfortunately, what happened. But the Saudis, they realized that they need to address this issue. For the first time, they realized that this is a serious issue in Yemen, and we need to address it. So now they are opening the Pandora box. Because, if you recycle the outcome of the national dialogue in Sana'a, then you are doing nothing. You are bringing the Southern cause into bracket one. So you did nothing. But what you will offer there? Are you offering them going back to the status quo ante in international law, that it was breaking two nations amicably in agreement, that the North and the South sit down after the Riyadh Southern Conference, and they can talk about it will be much better for us to survive, but in two nations. But this will be a huge success. But I don't think that this is the idea, because there is another party working for the federative Yemen with the North, and they are recycling the outcome of Sana'a. If the outcome of Riyadh is talking about a referendum, then it's also a positive sign. But if it's recycling that bad momentum of postponing the hopes of Southerners to the unseen future, that will be an issue, because the Southern movement then will have, the people of the South will have to assess the struggle methods. Maybe they will consider, after all these peaceful means, they will realize that peaceful means are not bringing results, and they need to look into other options.
I want to ask a follow-up question to Summer, and then just so you know where I'm going next, I'm gonna ask questions about Oman and Iran, and then we have some questions from the audience and from the live stream. But Summer, don't worry, it's not. I want to pick up on something which both you and Khalid have said before.
Everything volatile. Said it to
Yeah,
her
yeah.
or something. She's the one.
The question I have is, you had before said that the Emiratis, for cultural, for tribal reasons, were just better at engaging. What I want to ask you is, when you look at the engagement between the Emiratis with the Southerners, with various tribes and so forth, why? I mean, it's not like the Saudis are ignorant of local culture, or are they? Why is it? And what were the Emiratis doing? And why is it that they were more successful in their outreach generally than the Saudis?
One, like you said, there's that tribal connection. There's that tribal
What's the tribal
history.
connection? Because doesn't that exist with the Saudis?
It does exist with the Saudis, but I believe with the UAE it was consistent even throughout PDRY, while Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and others, they isolated the South.
So the Emirates had relations with the PDRY.
Yes, with the
Okay.
tribes there
Okay.
and the people there. So they had precedent.
Okay.
But then at the same time, they were there. They were there on the ground. They were
Okay.
visible. They trained the forces. And this is something that Southerners talk about constantly. The Emiratis were not condescending. You know,
Okay.
they made the Southerners and them as equal partners.
So they're not like Kuwaitis. Sorry.
Wow.
Sorry, anyway.
Yeah, so that's something that
Okay.
resonated with the Southerners, and the way that the UAE interacted with the Southerners as they were Emiratis, or they understood.
Okay.
The Saudis, they were focused on the north, so they didn't have, even though their forces were there, but because the duties and of training and all the security was left to the UAE, so Saudis were not as visible
Okay.
with Southerners, where the Emiratis were more visible and they
Do you know
communicated a lot.
What I found very interesting in the beginning of this last crisis, the week before the everything happened, the Muslim Brotherhood channels just put a small news with photos of the only operation that the army of People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, of South Yemen, before People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, after independence, days after independence, they had clashes with the Saudis in the border. Do you think why? Just to show that, look, they are your enemies. Even when it was a communist regime in PDRY, never presented any threat to the national security of Saudi Arabia. But the North was always a national threat to the Saudi Arabia. Go into the tribal, go how the tribes are milking Saudi Arabia. Go to see how the conflict, how Saleh was using the Houthis to threaten the border area to show that, give me money and I will fight the Houthis. 6 wars of a very beautiful design game of I attack here, you attack there. And there was no results in the 6 wars with the Houthis. And this was an expert in the UN, and he understands the complication of that process. Saleh was playing with AQAP, was playing with the Houthis to get money from the Saudis. The North was based on that game with the Saudis.
Yeah.
They consider historically, if you go to the 10th century, 9th century, the Zaydis, they consider that Mecca is their land.
Okay.
And they keep threatening the Saudis that they will take Mecca. Not the South. Not the South
Well,
at all.
Khalid, you've given me a segue, and I'm going to take the question to Fernando. But, okay, if I accept that the South, under the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, and of course you grew up there in Aden, you were born in Aden, never posed a threat to Saudi Arabia, the North did. At the same time, you can say that the PDRY posed a threat to the Sultanate of Oman. You had the Dhofar Rebellion. So when we're looking at where Oman sits on this, what Oman wants, and how what vision they have for the future of Yemen. You were the UN expert. What would you say?
You and I have discussed this since we met the first time with Oman and the relationship with Yemen, and I wrote that article that I proposed to the SDC, and I advised the SDC to rebrand itself in order to de-escalate the tensions with Oman. And what did we see by December 17? Saudi Arabia had already visited Muscat and had this conversation and signed a defense pact with Oman. And all of a sudden, the border with Oman and Mahra was closed. And then later on, early this month, we hear that Omani shared intelligence with the Saudis that led to the escalation from Saudi. So definitely the relationship for Saudi, if South Yemen is a national security issue for the Saudis, the South is strategic for Oman. This is a red line for the Omanis, and one of those symbols is that PDRY flag. The Sultan is of that generation that you mentioned. This isn't a brand new,
Sultan Haytham.
Gen Z Sultan.
The Omanis, they are very nostalgic about South Yemen. They're really a family to us. There is a lot of tribal ties and all this stuff in history. All this, the western part of Oman used to be part of the Great Yemen. So we are not talking history because we are, but if we want to just mention 3 huge mistakes in the PDRY, one of them was attacking Oman. Because of this idea that the South Yemen was thinking that they will liberate the Gulf from its sultanates and they will create the socialist expansion of nationalism, and at the end they will defeat the Saudis. And it was a total maniac ideas that you can't understand. But this is one. And the second was also attacking the North in the war of 80s, in the 97 to 81, 82. So this is a huge mistake of the mentality of the regime. Or the orientation of that regime. But now the southern movement has nothing to do with the Soviet background. The forces on the ground are Salafis, as you know. The Giant Brigade is a Salafi movement. So they are totally different composition of people. They want to live in peace with the northern people, with Saudis, with Omanis. And I hope that Omani should go over this historical crisis of looking into South Yemen as a threat. And this shows that how they support the Houthis and they use Muscat as a headquarters of
if I may,
international
really
commission.
quick, sorry, Samar, really quick. This is the miscalculation by the Omanis. And also remember that the Omanis have not engaged the Southerners. Throughout this conflict, they've engaged the GPC, they've engaged Islam, they've engaged the legitimate government, they engaged Houthis, but not the Southerners. Yes. So this is all, and this has been under the Sultan Haytham. So this has been one major miscalculation by the Omanis in not reaching out to the Southern forces and create some sort of reconciliation. One last thing, and your question to Samar about the relationship with the Emiratis, we were talking about this last night. The relationship between Yafa and the Emirati tribes, or the Emirates, the
Yafa tribe.
The Yafa tribe in Lahaj, Abiyan.
Best coffee ever.
Goes back to the colonial times of Britain, where the British Empire sent Yafi tribesmen to help the Emirati tribes whenever they were threatened by other
And just
tribes.
point of information, what's the second largest tribe in Qatar, isn't there?
It's also the Yafa'i tribe. The second largest tribe in Qatar is the Yafa'i tribe.
Okay, so
From
you have
Yafa,
those
South Yemen.
connections. And then, I'm
and then
sorry,
also in
I'm
Oman,
promising
too.
to let Summer come in, Khalid.
Please.
Yeah.
The Yafa'i, I'm only the Yafa'i.
Okay.
The Yafa'is are everywhere in the south.
Okay.
In Hadramaut,
Oh,
in Hyderabad, wherever you want. Yeah.
Summer, do you have any thoughts on Oman before I ask about Iran? And then I'm going to turn to audience questions from here, as well as audience questions that have come in online. And I'll emphasize, you can ask as many questions as you want, but I'm only going to have them answer the first one. And speeches aren't questions. So Oman, then we're going to talk Iran, then we're going to go to questions.
Like Khalid said, there are a lot of tribal ties between the South and Oman.
Do you see
They need-
Oman ever changing its position?
I'm hopeful. Yes, I mean, we are a different South Yemen. We are not the South Yemen that existed during PDRY. We are different. We have a different agenda right now. We don't have the expansionist agenda of the communist regime. And then we've said this multiple times that the only thing we seek is peace in our territory and also peace for Oman and Saudi Arabia that we share borders with.
Okay, elephant in the room.
Our relations with Oman is very, very historical and profound. Even there is a quasi-queen was governing in Salalah from Yafa.
Okay.
A Yafi queen governing in Salalah. You can imagine how deep it goes. So even the Sultan, I will give you, it's anecdotic, but anecdotic keeps
Very
people
quickly,
thinking.
because we start on time, we end on time.
Sultan Qaboos,
Yeah.
I was present in that meeting. He said, the best time of my life was when I was going to London. I go through Aden.
Okay.
And I spent not only 2 days, 1 week, because I love the Crescent Hotel. And I stay there. And this is the human-to-human relations.
Got it. Now, the elephant in the room is with everything going on in Iran. Let me ask the question this way. Instead of rehashing everything the Pastaran, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has been doing to co-opt the Houthis, the Zaydis, and so forth, if the Islamic Republic falls, what's the future of the Houthis in your view? Are they simply the latest manifestation of the imamate, meaning they're not going to go away, that the United States is wrong only to see them through the lens of Iran? Do they have staying power? Will the fight continue?
If I may.
Go.
Definitely.
La palabra es tuya.
The Houthis are a permanent fixture in Sana'a, unfortunately, today. And this is, again, up to Saudi Arabia, how it shapes the future. The Houthis will survive any revolution in Tehran, in Iran, because they have already been empowered technically, ideologically, financially. I just did an interview about this. And this is why the Houthis have prioritized expansion to the Horn of Africa and to Sudan and Iraq. So definitely I would see the Houthis
Do you agree
as a long
Summer?
I don't see them surviving the way they're governing because they govern with an iron fist, and probably if the Iran government falls, the Houthis, nor the Yemenis would probably be motivated to get rid of the Houthis as well, because they are as oppressive as the Iranian regime.
Okay, call it, and we're going to be quick because we're running out of time.
Disagree with Samar. I agree with. Look, the Houthi phenomena is there to stay for quite some time. It's the revival of the Zaydism control of the highlands, and they will stay there.
Okay.
The only issue that the Saudis can do is discipline the movement and contain it inside Yemen. But they will keep controlling, they will keep governing Sana'a and the northern part of Yemen. Maybe they can stop their attacks on the southern Red Sea, attacking other countries, these sort of things. But they are there to stay and to prosper even.
Okay, a question from the live stream, and then have your questions ready. Live stream question number 1. What are the factors that make Saudi domination of Yemen, particularly the south, unsustainable? Is it sectarianism, economic stagnation, or authoritarian rule? Why can't the Saudis consolidate control over the south? Very quickly.
I don't think they have the government infrastructure in order to manage the south. And one term that I'm using in my writing now, it's proconsul, which we U.S. analysts and national security have used since the early 2000s when the military took over the diplomacy. This attempt with the national forces, the newly national forces created, is an attempt to create such a model of proconsuls in the south. We know that these models fail and that they create more of a vacuum than they fix problems.
Okay, Summer or Khalid, do you have any
Oh yeah.
I will never interrupt you this time.
I think they can
Okay.
if they work with Southerners. Going back to 2015, the success of UAE and the success of the Arab coalition in its entirety, led by Saudi Arabia, is because they worked with Southerners. They understood the grievances of Southerners and working with them. So that's where the success came. If they're able to do that and work with the Southerners and understand the Southern grievances, they'd be successful.
Okay, and then, oh,
I think if the Saudis take the route of building trust in the South by just giving the region sort of self-administration, that will go in their favor.
okay.
Because then everyone will stay in his room and we will survive.
Okay.
And the Saudis will have a success in this process. Because now you see that the Houthis are calling for the self-administration. So we are calling for the self-administration everywhere in the South. If we do that, then we'll go one step in accommodating the Southern movement interest, and the Saudis will succeed in the South and in Yemen also.
It's not the job of the moderator to speak, but just one observation. It seems that if the Southerners want some degree of autonomy, if the Hadramis want some degree of autonomy, then what we're really talking about is a reconstitution of the Federation of South Arabia. But I'm just, wouldn't want to, I want to get to the next question. The next question from the live stream is, how has Israel's recognition of Somaliland changed the strategic calculus in the Bab el-Mandab Gulf of Aden for the South Yemen movement? Is this a clash of interests between Saudi Arabia on one hand and Israel and the United Arab Emirates on the other? We addressed this a little bit, but is there anything else any of you want to add? And then the next question goes to the audience, so I see in the back.
I think coupling the events in Somaliland with something in Yemen itself is a little bit of an extreme.
Some people have written, though, that the Emirates stands for an axis of succession.
Exactly. And these secessionist movements existed pre-Emirati policy.
Okay.
I mean, Somaliland
Was independent
old.
in 1960.
Yeah. And so the Iraq, I mean, one would ask, someone that has studied Yemen for 25 years would ask, well, where were the Emiratis when Iraq was born in 2006? You didn't see the flood of money, the weapons, the relationship. It was an organic movement, and obviously it reached a point where policy interests meshed, and the Emiratis stepped in. So I think it's a little bit of an extreme, and it's a shame that there is this tendency to inject Israel narrative into every single thing that happens in the Middle East.
Okay. If you can
I will say something if you want.
Okay.
I think the Abrahamic momentum in the region is not gone, is not failing, but it's reinventing itself. There is a lot of negotiation.
Okay.
And this negotiation will lead to one day we see the entire region, living in peace and coexistence.
Okay.
And that's the reality of things. But what's happening now, we have the Palestinian issue, and the Americans, they promised they will address this issue. They are starting to addressing the Gaza, and now they are reforming the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah.
And that will move the context into understanding between Arabs and the Israelis. This is the vision for the future. Of course, it goes ups and downs, that has its ups and downs, but at the end, we will reach there.
If you can say who you are, what your affiliation is, before you ask the question, and the next question will be over here. Please.
Jay Kansara, private, just interested in this topic. How do we address, or how do you see the tie-up between Saudi and Pakistan and UAE and India playing into the stability of this region, or do you see it as a proxy of their conflict projected into the Arabian Peninsula?
If I could just say very quickly before I turn the question over, I recently returned to Aden for the first time in 30 years, And one of the biggest differences I experienced in my 2 times there was the willingness and sort of the identity of people in Aden to identify themselves as of Indian background, Indian heritage, 5, 6, 7 generations back. It really was striking. And when I was in the Hadramaut 30 years ago, of course, in Tarim and Sayoun and so forth, there were clear signs of that Indian trade heritage. But let me turn the question over the floor before we go over here.
If I may, last night we were talking about the relationship between Jaffa and India, between Hadramis and India. So that relationship has existed because of colonial times under Britain. I think to your point about India, Pakistan, and the Emirates and the Saudis, this goes beyond Yemen. I mean, this is a consequence of a symptom of all of this, but it's, you have Sudan, who is in the middle of that issue because now the SAF is supposedly receiving SAF, the Sudanese Armed Forces, in Khartoum and Port Sudan, had a military deal, a weapons deal with Pakistan, right? And so you saw the Saudi, Pakistan, Turkish defense pact coming. So, I mean, but even before all of this, MBZ bin Zayed from the Emirates had already visited and welcomed Indian officials in Abu Dhabi. So, again, the optics, I understand that fuel this conflict, but these relationships go beyond the current conflict at the moment.
This is the logic of the American withdrawal from the region. This is the logic that if you see that the Guardian is telling everyone that I'm not interested in this business anymore. So you will see people, and we might go through difficult times because we will see alliances being created, alliances failing, and all this stuff of things in the region. But we hope that all these creation of new phenomena will not be destructive and taking the region to more wars and conflicts.
Question again, name, affiliation, and then your question.
Sure. Hi, my name is Christopher Blanchard. I'm the Yemen and Saudi Arabia analyst for the Congressional Research Service. My question is for Ms. Ahmed. I wanted to give you the opportunity to articulate, without recapitulating or relitigating what's happened, what the STC tangibly would like to see both the governments of Saudi Arabia and the United States do over the next 6 to 9 months in terms of building a positive relationship and also having success in assuring security in Yemen and confronting the Houthi threat. Thank you.
It's a great question to end on.
Yeah, thank you. That is a wonderful question. Like Fernando said earlier, the SDC was the largest political entity in South Yemen, and it was also the most cohesive and organized political entity. Seeing its dissolution or trying to break it up is really counterproductive to the successes and achievements that had happened in the past 10 years, especially in counterterrorism and also and continue to repelling Houthi expansion into South Yemen or maritime. So the best thing that, well, right now UAE is out and everything is in the hands of Saudi Arabia. Learning from the successes that the UAE had, especially in countering terrorism and in working with the southern forces, Saudi Arabia has a really good opportunity to keep those forces intact. And they've been sending messages that they will keep those forces intact, especially after the debacle that happened in Hadramaut with tribal militias and terrorists just coming in. I know that wasn't the intention of Saudi Arabia when they entered Hadramaut, but when they opened the gates, everyone came in. So learning from that debacle, they they did not dismantle the rest of the southern forces, like the Shabwa defense forces, who Michael went and saw the successes they had against both the Houthis and AQAP, and then also the counterterrorism forces that are in Abyan and the others. So making sure that those forces stay intact and they continue to get the same training and support that they had from the UAE would be successful, and it will safeguard South Yemen and also protect Saudi Arabia from any Houthi expansion or AQAP regaining territories they've been pushed out of in South Yemen. So mostly focus on security and keep those southern forces intact and supported.
Can I make a quick comment on this and back to my comment regarding the dialogue in Riyadh?
Yes, and then I'll give Khalid the last word, and then
a really quick story from 2012, after the Arab Spring, and I was in Sana'a. I approached the UNDP. I had a friend working in the UNDP, and I approached them with a proposal for a South-South dialogue conference, to begin a South-South dialogue conference after 2011. And the Yemeni national in charge at that particular department in UNDP said, but wait, there is no need for South-South dialogue. Everybody, number one, everybody gets along in the South. Number two, there's no tribes in the South. And so, you know, as we look back to that, the SDC spent the whole year holding a national dialogue throughout the South in order to create reconciliation, in order to bring in all the parties, Baum, Ali Nasser, Al-Bayth, every wing of Iraq, spent the whole year to doing that. And now what Saudi Arabia is doing is deconstructing that effort, destroying that effort, that there's always going to be opposition. There's always going to be somebody that wants something else. Ben Habrish is not anti-South, he just has his own personal interest. Ben Habrish is the individual, the former head of the Hadramaut Tribal Alliance that took over the Petromasila facility on December 3rd and sort of began this entire conflict. He simply wanted a better spot, and he was the deputy governor of Hadramaut. I mean, that shows you his personal ambition, his interest, where the primary drivers behind his opposition to SDC sort of efforts since then. And so this is why I warned, sort of asked the Saudi friends to be cautious, because trying to reinvent the wheel, you know, is going to create a vacuum and more conflict to come.
Mr. Foreign Minister, last word.
We hope that with the Saudi support and commitment, South Yemen will get another step towards independence. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everyone else for coming here. I'd like to thank the conferences staff who put this together in the background. They not only did a wonderful job organizing, they put up with me. I want to thank Satvik, my assistant, who actually, when people say I organize this, I don't organize anything. Satvik organizes. So I'm just very grateful for everyone who helped in the background. A round of applause for them, please.